These are the new 3-cylinder bikes from CFMoto, the 675 SRR and the 675 NK. I had the chance to ride them today in Portimao, so stay tuned. And with that, a warm welcome from sunny Algarve, or at least that's what they say. In the afternoon we had rain, but no worries, the morning gave us perfect riding weather. And that's when we took the super sport bike out on track. So in this video, we'll be focusing on that machine. Now, this is CFMoto's brand new super sport, a 3-cylinder 675 cubic centimeter bike. And this engine, or rather this platform, which also serves as the base for the naked model, is a big deal for CFMoto. They've said, we've had sporty bikes before, but we were missing a 3-cylinder, a true sport bike, and now they've delivered with these two motorcycles. So this video is all about the SRR, and to get everyone up to speed, let's take a look at the technical specs. The new inline 3-cylinder engine with 675 cubic centimeters produces 88 horsepower at 11,000 revolutions per minute and delivers 68 Newton meters of torque at 8,250 revolutions per minute. Seat height is 810 millimeters, with optional accessories allowing for 830 millimeters or 795 millimeters. The SRR weighs in at 189 kilograms and the fuel tank holds 15 liters. The Kayaba suspension setup includes a fully adjustable 41 millimeter upside down fork and a monoshock with adjustable preload and rebound. Suspension travel is 130 millimeters at both the front and rear. The Jehuan braking system features dual front discs with radially mounted 4-piston calipers and a single rear disc with a single piston floating caliper. ABS and traction control come as standard, though they are not lean angle sensitive. The bike runs on 17-inch wheels front and rear, with tire dimensions of 120/70/17 at the front and 180/50/17 at the rear. Additional features include LED lighting with animated indicators, a 5-inch TFT display and an optional connectivity system. The new CFMoto 675 SRR is available in Nebula White, Nebula Black and Aerolite Grey. Now let's hop on the SRR. I'm on board this road-going sport bike, and I have to say, even though it looks very sporty, it's still designed for street riding, with the occasional track day in mind. But within this class of road-going sport bikes, I'd say it's one of the sportier options. Over the past 1 year, I've ridden quite a few bikes in this segment. Models like the Suzuki GSX-8R and the Triumph Daytona, and the CFMoto SRR definitely ranks among the sportier ones. I'm 1.75 meters tall, and I find the riding position quite stretched forward with a knee angle that feels just right for my size. It's ideal for me. If you're taller, it might feel a bit tight around the tank, but CFMoto has a solution for that with an optional taller seat. So if you're taking one for a test ride, be sure to check out which seat height suits you best, but this is definitely a sporty riding position. I've got some pressure on the handlebars, and right in front of me is the 5-inch color TFT display, which even features connectivity for both Android and Apple devices. But what else can this display do? What about the overall look and feel of the SRR? Well, let's take a closer look in our walk around. Here, under the CFMoto arch, we're kicking off our walk around of the 675 SRR. Let's start with the front end. We've got what's now the signature CFMoto Super Sport design, only this time even more aggressive. And as you can already see, we've got functional winglets here. They look great visually, but they're also meant to provide a performance advantage, helping the SRR stand out from its smaller siblings. Looking further up front, we see the LED daytime running light on top, with the main LED headlights positioned below. And if we move further down, we get to the brake cooling ducts. We had the bike out on track today, so of course the question is, how much do they really contribute in terms of temperature management? But they certainly add to the aggressive styling, and at least on paper they should provide some performance benefits. Moving around the bike, we've got a clear windscreen which offers decent wind protection on track. Of course, it's always a different story on the road. We'll hopefully get to test that soon. Now, looking back at the display, we immediately noticed that the bike comes with a built-in lap timer. That means you can check your lap times on the go right from the cockpit. Up here, you can also see indicators for the quick shifter and traction control. So let's dive into the menu. Here, you can configure the bike's features. The traction control is two-stage and can also be fully deactivated. The emergency brake light can be switched off as well, and the quick shifter can be turned on or off. Speaking of the quick shifter, as mentioned earlier, it only works for upshifts. The ABS, however, cannot be disabled through the display. So if you're planning to take the SRR to the track and want to switch it off, you'll have to do what the CFMoto engineers did today. That means reaching under the seat, held in place with screws, and pulling the ABS fuse manually. Moving towards the rear, we get a look at the aggressively designed tail section, which for me is actually one of the biggest visual highlights of this bike, the tail light. I haven't seen anything quite like this on a motorcycle before. It's a horizontal LED strip with integrated indicators on both sides. I think it looks completely new and really stands out. And then of course we've got a classic Supersport feature, the aerodynamic cutouts in the tail section. It's a design element borrowed from other manufacturers who have been doing it for many years, but it definitely suits the SRR as well. If we take a look at the side, we can see the underfloor exhaust, which is covered by a protective grille. But I have to say, the sound is really good. It was a real pleasure to listen to while riding. And of course, this guy here, the 3-cylinder engine, how it performs, I'll tell you all about that a bit later. One of the biggest questions with Chinese motorcycles is always, how does it feel? How's the build quality? Looking at the handlebars, the triple clamp and the controls, everything is well put together. It looks good, feels good to the touch, and is easy to operate. In terms of quality, there's really nothing I can criticize. The clutch and brake levers are adjustable, and overall, when I check the fit and finish, the panel gaps, it's all neatly done. So for those who still believe that Chinese bikes lack quality, at least with this brand new model, after a few sessions on track, as you can see from the rear tire, it still looks great and more importantly has a premium feel. I think this will especially appeal to new riders looking for an entry-level supersport with an attractive price and a 3-cylinder engine. They'll definitely enjoy this package. But that wraps up our walk around of the new CFMoto 675 SRR. So I think by now you've got a solid impression of the SRR in terms of specs and build quality. Today we had the chance to ride it here in Portimao on the MotoGP circuit, the famous roller coaster of Portugal. It was an absolute highlight to ride here. I have to admit I was a bit intimidated at first, as we say in Austria, because this track really pushes you to your limits. But once you get used to it, it's incredibly rewarding. We had 3 sessions today, 2 15-minute runs with a guide in front, followed by a final 25-minute session of free riding. I have to say, the first 2 sessions were mostly about learning the track, figuring out where the turns are, where the next crest leads. But in the 3rd session, that's when things really clicked and I could properly get a feel for the bike, especially for this new 3-cylinder engine. I was so in the moment, so immersed in the ride that I just had to sit down next to the bike to share my first impressions with you. Let's talk briefly about the engine of the new CFMoto 675 SRR. This 3-cylinder was developed entirely from scratch for this platform, and it's a fully in-house design by CFMoto. They've said we've had sporty bikes before, but we were missing the sound. Apparently, that was a major focus for the Chinese engineers, and I can tell you, they've nailed it. This engine has sound, and inline 3 is always a recipe for fun, and CFMoto has managed to build a great engine on their first try. With 90 horsepower, it's not an absolute powerhouse, and I'm still waiting for confirmation from CFMoto on whether this engine can be restricted for A2 riders or if they'll offer a dedicated kit. But here on track in Portimao, the engine has already proven its capabilities, and I have to say, it's got quite a lot to offer. This track is seriously demanding, and with only 3 sessions to learn it, I'll be honest, the first 2 runs were just about getting my bearings. Portimao's roller coaster nature makes it so technical that when you crest one of its many blind hills, you're already wondering which direction the track turns next. It takes time to really get comfortable here. And that's where this engine showed its strengths. It's very forgiving. You can ride it without constantly shifting. I spent most of my time in 3rd gear, and while the low-end power is a bit weak, once you get into the higher revs, the engine really comes alive. It's got enough punch to keep the ride engaging and let you focus on your lines rather than constantly working the gearbox. I was especially surprised by the power delivery. On paper, it's only 90 horsepower, but it moves along really well. CFMoto officially states a top speed of 220 kilometers per hour, but I can tell you, it's capable of more. I hit 220 kilometers per hour in 5th gear and it was still pulling, so there's definitely more in this engine than the spec sheet suggests. Of course, there are 1 or 2 areas where you wish for a little more, but naturally, this bike was built with a price point in mind. The throttle response is generally smooth, but occasionally you do notice some slight throttle lag or abrupt transitions when rolling back on the gas mid-corner. Once you get used to it, you adjust accordingly, but it's worth mentioning. We've got a fully mechanical throttle here, old school style, and as a result, the bike only comes with an upshift quick shifter. There's no auto blipper. Yes, it does have a slipper clutch, but no downshift assist, and on the track, that's something you really miss. Especially here in Portimao, when you're heading downhill and need to downshift, you have to manually work the clutch while already managing a lot at once. That means you don't always get the seamless, precise feedback you'd expect from a true supersport machine. That said, I'd assume most riders will be using this bike on the road rather than the track. I can't confirm it firsthand since we only rode on the circuit, but I imagine the engine works really well on the street too. The power band is flexible with enough pull from the lower revs and the gearbox shifts smoothly. Plus, with traction control on board, you've got an extra layer of safety. But that's enough about the engine of the new CFMoto 675 SRR. Let's move on. How did the rest of the hardware perform on track? Speaking from the perspective of an occasional track day rider, I do a few 1000 PS track days now and then, but I'm not a hardcore racer chasing lap times. I'd say this bike is perfectly suited for riders like me. The riding position is relatively sporty, but not so extreme that it would overwhelm a beginner at their first track days. And the overall hardware is well matched to entry-level riders. The brakes, equipped with ABS, though not lean sensitive, performed well with no fading throughout the day. However, as you push harder, the ABS does tend to kick in a little early and the intervention intervals aren't the smoothest. But you can trail brake confidently into corners without the bike wanting to stand up too aggressively, which is a definite plus. Maybe the front brake cooling ducts actually do help in keeping performance consistent. At least they didn't hurt. The suspension also impressed me. The front fork is fully adjustable, while the rear shock allows for preload and rebound adjustments. Both performed really well, providing solid feedback from the front wheel. Portimao does have some bumps and minor surface irregularities, but overall it's a smooth track and the suspension handled everything nicely, giving me a clear feel for what the bike was doing. Now here's a surprising recommendation, the tires. None of the journalists expected much, but the CST semi-slicks fitted to the bike actually worked really well. I should mention that we had moderate temperatures today, around 15 to 20 degrees Celsius, so the asphalt wasn't too hot. If we were running in 30 degrees summer heat, I can't say how they'd hold up, but for a beginner level track day, you don't necessarily need to swap them for supercourses. These will do just fine. Lastly, the traction control, it's switchable with 2 levels of intervention and can be completely turned off. The ABS, on the other hand, isn't deactivatable via the display, but the CFMoto engineers today simply pulled a fuse under the seat, which effectively disabled it. That means if you want a bit more control in the braking zones, there's a workaround for that too. So the CFMoto 675 SRR really proved itself on the big Portimao track, a real surprise. Before we wrap up, I want to briefly touch on the naked version, the NK. I had a chance to ride it this afternoon, but by then we already had conditions like we do now, rain. Unfortunately, we didn't get to ride it on public roads, but instead on a go-kart track. The track guides warned us to be extra careful, as the surface was slippery due to rubber buildup from the go-karts. So they told us to take it easy, not to push too hard. Because of that, I'll keep my impressions of the NK brief, since I wasn't able to give it the proper road test it deserves. Still, I want to hop on it quickly to show you the ergonomics. It has a classic naked bike setup, very upright, with a high-mounted handlebar that comes back towards the rider. The knee angle is once again comfortably sporty, and like the SRR, there's also an optional taller seat available. I have to say, the riding position gives me a good sense of control over the front end, making the bike feel quite agile. Some journalists even thought it was too agile, but of course, that could be due to the wet conditions affecting how the bike behaves compared to riding on a dry road. One thing I did notice while riding the NK on the go-kart track was how the engine behaves at low revs. When rolling into corners at slow speeds and then getting back on the throttle at low revolutions per minute, the engine can feel a bit rough. It doesn't stutter, but below 4,000 revolutions per minute, you definitely notice some abrupt throttle transitions. This means that on twisty roads, particularly in tight hairpins, the bike might feel a little unsettled when you open the throttle. Other than that, when you rev the NK out, the engine is an absolute dream. The sound on both bikes is fantastic and the quick shifter works well, though upshifts can feel a bit rough at times. I really hope we get to test the NK properly on the road later this season, as that's where it truly belongs. Now, back to the SRR, which I spent more time on today at the big track. Who do I see riding this bike? It's clear to me it's perfect for track day beginners taking their first steps on a race circuit. It's also for riders who want a sporty looking bike that sounds incredible and can hold its own on track while still being usable for everyday riding. The SRR ticks all those boxes. The bike is accessible, the engine is flexible, and best of all, it's affordable. Let's talk prices. In Germany, the SRR is priced at under 8,000 euros, final price still to be confirmed. In Austria, it comes in at 8,800 euros. The NK, the naked version, is even more affordable. 6,500 euros in Germany and 7,500 euros in Austria. Those are some seriously competitive prices. CFMoto is making a bold move here. So what's the final verdict? Looking at the price, CFMoto has dropped a real bombshell, at least in terms of affordability. And after today's track test in Portimao, these bikes have positively surprised the journalists. They look great, they have a modern design, and they come with up-to-date tech, including the TFT display, all at an affordable price. So if you're not necessarily looking for the premium allure of a big name brand, but instead want a bike that works well, doesn't break the bank, and is still fun to ride, you should definitely check out these CFMotos. I've also heard from importers and dealers attending the event that there are discussions about setting up dedicated racing series with these bikes, particularly for dealership customers. That just shows how attractive they are due to their low entry price, and even better, they actually perform well. I hope you enjoyed the video and my first impressions of the two new 3-cylinder CFMotos. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think of these bikes? And I really recommend taking one for a test ride. The engine is an absolute blast. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and goodbye.